Perhaps one of the most memorable characters in the Rocky Creed franchise is Apollo Creed, former world heavyweight champion and rival of Rocky Balboa, who then became one of Rocky's close personal friends and trainer. Apollo is one of those characters I grew to understand and love more as an adult now compared to when I was a teenager, with the new Creed films contributing to this as well. While Apollo lives on in his son Adonis, it's without a doubt while he had his flaws that led to his downfall, Apollo is an unforgettable character. This is why Apollo Creed is the greatest. Let's talk about his duality with Rocky in Rocky II, his legacy, his fighting style, and more. Let's do a recap on what we know about Apollo Creed so far. Feel free to skip ahead and avoid the recap, but be warned, you may miss some important details later on in the video. If we were to believe what happened to Apollo before the Rocky films are true as depicted in Rocky Legends, Apollo began his career in the 60s. He first met Tony Duke Evers in the National Amateur Boxing Finals, and after defeating Duke, who was at the end of his career, asked him to be his boxing trainer as he was turning pro the next month. Apollo would go on to win 46 straight fights, becoming world champion in the process. Apollo prepares for another title defense against Mackley Green for New Year's Day 1976, but Green suffers a cracked metacarpal in his left hand. With 5 weeks left and no contenders wanting to train in that amount of time, Apollo Creed decides to make the match a novelty by challenging a local Philadelphia fighter. Creed picks Rocky Balboa from the list because of his nickname of the Italian Stallion, and since an Italian discovered America, what better way to celebrate America than to get it on with one of his descendants? Apollo Creed does his best to put on a show, ignoring Duke's warning that Rocky means business, with a grand entrance and doesn't take the fight seriously in the first round. However, Rocky knocks Apollo down in the first round for the first time in Creed's career, which angers Apollo, who begins to take the fight seriously. The match ends in a split decision for Apollo after Rocky goes the distance, and Apollo claims there won't be a rematch. However, Apollo changes his mind as soon as he arrives at the hospital, claiming Rocky was lucky and wants to fight then and there. Apollo lets the notion go at first as Rocky claims that he's retired, but pursues the idea after hate mail comes in, his children are insulted at school, and the public opinion seems to be that Apollo had the fight fixed. Apollo meets with Duke and his marketing team on promoting the rematch between himself and Rocky. Duke tries to convince to fight someone else, as even though Rocky took a beating, he kept coming after Apollo. Creed decides to still pursue the match anyway, taking an antagonistic approach through flyers and trash-talking Balboa on TV. Rocky eventually agrees to the match, and Apollo trains harder to get himself ready. Apollo dominates most of the rematch. He's fast and is more aggressive with Rocky, taunting him during the match. However, Rocky fights back, and in the final round, as the two are running on fumes, Apollo tries to go for the knockout but is knocked down by Rocky's left hook. Apollo fails to beat the 10 count and wishes Rocky luck as he becomes the new champion. Years later, Apollo is present during Rocky's 11th title defense against Clubber Lang. Being disrespected by Clubber, Apollo wishes Rocky good luck while telling him to drop this chump. Rocky loses the fight, and Apollo expresses his disappointment and seeks out Rocky with the idea of promoting a second match between Rocky and Clubber, while also offering to train him in exchange for a big favor. Apollo and Duke train Rocky, who is at first unfocused and still upset over the loss of Mickey and how he feels responsible for it, but Adrian gets him out of the funk and Rocky transforms himself as a fighter. Before the rematch, Apollo gives Rocky the trunks he wore in their first fight together. Apollo successfully coaches Rocky to a victory, winning back the title in the process. The big favor is a friendly rematch between the two, which Rocky agrees to. Apollo wins this match, and Rocky keeps this a secret until years later. In 1985, now having been retired for a number of years, Apollo approaches Rocky to be in his corner as he fights Ivan Drago, a Soviet boxer who is the world amateur boxing champion both for the pride of his country and to find a way back into the limelight. Despite a heated press conference, Apollo remains confident and goes on to fight Drago. However, much like he did with Rocky, he underestimates Ivan's superhuman strength and, in combination with his age, takes a vicious beating in the first round. Despite Rocky's protest to stop the fight, Apollo forces him to not stop the fight no matter what. This would ultimately lead to Ivan killing Apollo in the ring. Out of guilt and for revenge, Rocky would wear Apollo's trunks once again and travel to Russia, defeating Ivan Drago in a match in front of his home crowd. Before his fight with Ivan, Apollo had an affair with a woman by the last name of Johnson, resulting in the birth of his third child, Adonis, who was born after Apollo's fight with Ivan. Adonis would begin a boxing career of his own, at first refusing to embrace the Creed name. However, after seeking out Rocky, Adonis's attitude begins to shift as Rocky takes him under his wing. Adonis would go on to embrace the Creed name and fulfill his own legacy, becoming world champion and defeating Victor Drago, son of Ivan Drago, in a rematch. Apollo's name lives on as Little Duke, Tony's son, and Adonis go on to run the Delphi gym together and promote under Creed Athletics, just like his father used to promote matches. The first fight between Rocky and Apollo is used as an idea for Felix Chavez to give Dame Anderson a shot at the title. Let's first talk about why Apollo is the greatest, including his character qualities and the legacy of his character. While the intention to give Rocky a title shot was more for the novelty of the fight and to hype it up even more due to Green's absence, I still think it's a noble gesture for Apollo to give that shot to an unknown. Perhaps he wanted to give someone a shot because nobody ever gave him a shot, and as we all know, it changed Rocky's life forever. Although hyping the fight and not taking it seriously at first also proved to be part of Apollo's undoing, it made Apollo realize that he may have found a worthy rival. When Apollo was knocked down for the first time in his career, he quickly shifted to another gear to make sure the fight was all about business. Perhaps similar to Mason Dixon, it's likely that Apollo's career was getting stale, as he was undefeated for 46 straight fights up until that point. Rocky being picked at that time was the best thing that happened to both of them. Near the end of the first super fight, Apollo says there will be no rematch. This changes at the beginning of Rocky 2, which I always thought was weird, but perhaps it needed to be retconned as the producers were anxious to make a sequel. Perhaps he had a change of heart on the way to the hospital, and although it's likely he lied to Rocky when asked if he gave his best, he now wants to prove that he can beat Rocky. He not only needs to prove it to himself, but also wants to protect his children from being insulted at school, and is even so far as willing to become a villain using whatever underhanded tactics he can use to get Balboa in the ring. This way of the warrior would reflect his later arc in Rocky IV, notably the director's cut, as Apollo wanted to go out the way he wanted to and had a killer instinct that you just can't turn on and off. This is also speculated by Rocky and Adonis in Creed 1 and 2 when reflecting on the fight between Ivan and Apollo. This way of the warrior is further seen in the final round of the rematch between Rocky and Apollo, as he doesn't want to win by the decision. He wants to prove Rocky is a fluke and go for the knockout. Though Apollo ends up losing, mutual respect is shared between the two. Apollo raises Rocky's hand when his name is called and wishes him good luck while patting him on the head. As I've said in my Rocky Balboa video, Rocky 3 is one of my favorites of the franchise because of the depth it gives to Rocky and Apollo, especially the latter. Apollo still maintains his respect towards Rocky as a fighter, remarking that he had experience in the world's hardest head, joking with Stu Nahan by saying, "Why do you think I'm out here with you?" Before the fight begins, Apollo wishes Rocky good luck and tells him to be clever, still showing that he has faith in him as a champion. We can see that Apollo still has that warrior mindset as he moves his head from side to side while watching the match. Apollo also looks disappointed when Rocky takes a beating and loses, even yelling at Rocky to get up. Despite Rocky being in a slump, Apollo can relate to how he's feeling because he felt the same way when he lost to Rocky. He thinks that Rocky can stand a chance against Clubber if he takes it back to basics, motivating him to have that same hunger he had when they fought, the Eye of the Tiger, and is willing to not only help win the title back, but to also promote the fight. Apollo and Tony take Rocky under their wing and retrain Rocky as a boxer. The two do their best to motivate Rocky, with Creed notably discouraging Policy's negative talk so Rocky can be in the right mindset. However, Apollo is willing to tell Rocky how it is when trying to get him in the game and telling him how strong Clubber is. His famous line, "There is no tomorrow," rings true. The time is now, and no one is guaranteed tomorrow. If Rocky wants to stand a chance now, he needs to build up his endurance. Apollo compliments and encourages Rocky as soon as he gets out of the funk, as we see the epic bro hug on the beach. Before the fight with Clubber, Apollo reminds Rocky of what Clubber did to him the first time and to remember where he came from, while also gifting him the trunks he wore in their first fight. Although showing concern for Rocky's new strategy, Apollo eventually believes in it and tells Rocky that he needs to be more man than him. Rocky makes good on his word and does a favor for Apollo. A third match between them that's behind closed doors to see who really is the greatest between them. Apollo would end up winning this third fight, also giving Rocky a hat in the process, and there's a popular theory out there that part of his motivation to defeat Ivan Drago was so he could also challenge Rocky for the title one last time. Apollo's talk with Rocky when they're rewatching Super Fight 2 also gives us a closer look into Apollo's way of thinking. He doesn't want to go out quietly. He wants to go out like a warrior and sees Rocky as his equal because of their killer instinct and that they can't change who they are, no matter what belts they win or things they own. This would also explain why he didn't want Rocky to stop the fight. He wanted to go out like a warrior and not give up on his own terms. In my Rocky IV Which Cut is Better video, the director's cut makes some nice changes that suit Apollo's character more and also ties the Creed films in nicely. Apollo talks with Rocky at his house about still wanting to fight, to which Rocky responds that he has nothing more to prove, and a nice callback to Rocky 2. Creed also says that he doesn't want to change in his talk with Rocky and wants to defend the legacy of his name. I also appreciate the fact that Apollo fought back more in the director's cut, as that's what really would have happened, and it was also more realistic. Sure, Apollo hadn't fought in a while, but he still would have been able to fight back. Regarding the legacy of his character, Rocky wearing Apollo's trunks to fight Ivan in Russia was a solid choice. Tony had faith in Rocky for doing so and said that Rocky made him and Apollo proud. I do like the nice little touch in Rocky 5 where Rocky Jr. has a poster of both Rocky and Apollo on his wall, suggesting that Apollo is like an uncle. While I do plan on covering a video about Adonis, we can't not talk about him now, as Apollo lives on through him. As I've mentioned before in my Rocky video, one of the best parallels is now Rocky trains Adonis, similar to how Apollo trained Rocky. Rocky even carries some of these lessons, remarking to Adonis, "It's all about today, there is no tomorrow," when he fights against Leo Sparino. Adonis fights using Apollo's moves, thanks to Rocky's advice, as he remembered what combinations worked against him, and it's also possible that the two sat down and watched some of his old fights. Though Adonis is initially caught in the shadow because of how great of a fighter his father was, and the fact that he is the illegitimate son of Apollo, he manages to embrace the Creed name and goes on to wear trunks that both have Creed and Johnson on it. Like his father, Adonis is also a hothead, but learns to get past it eventually. Adonis would go on to fight Victor Drago, son of Ivan Drago, to accomplish what his father couldn't do, beat a Drago. He also visits his father's grave, presumably for the first time, and mentions that he did it, not for Apollo, but because it was his fight, while also introducing Amara. Adonis continues the legacy of the Creeds by becoming a promoter like his father was, and is able to fight his demons in Creed 3 as his father would in Rocky 2. Let's also talk about the duality between Apollo and Rocky in Rocky 2. Both would end up in the hospital after a grueling fight. Apollo would go on to try to prove it not only to others but to himself that he could beat Rocky, similar to Rocky's reasoning of wanting to go the distance with Creed to prove he wasn't just another bum from the neighborhood. Both struggle to adjust to their life after the fight. Rocky tries his best to focus on the future by building a family and to not fight anymore, while Apollo can't escape from the negative opinions as they start to affect his children at school. Both trainers, who are father figures to the two fighters, try to talk them out of the fight. They also tell the truth, though neither is willing to accept it. Rocky won't accept that his time is up because of his bad eye, and Apollo can't accept that he won by split decision. Rocky and Apollo were both broken from the first fight as well. Apollo had broken ribs that eventually healed, while Rocky had to have surgery on his eye. A popular theory, and one I think to be true, is that Apollo has the other cufflink of Rocky Marciano, as one was given to Mickey Goldmill, who gave it to Rocky. I say this because in Rocky 3, you can see that Rocky's clearly wearing his like a necklace, just like Apollo does in the mirror scene in Rocky 2. In some shots of the ring, you can see there's a design that has the respective colors they fight in, and both trunks that they wear have their names on them. These colors would also reflect similar attire they wore, or at least primary colors, with Apollo's red to Rocky's yellow in their sparring match in Rocky 3. It's also interesting to note that Apollo's trunks are an inverse of what Rocky wore in Rocky 1, the colors on Rocky's poster to be exact, with his robe being mainly white with red trim. I've speculated that may have been done to mock Rocky. During the fight, it's interesting to note at times that both of their trainers are calling out to the respective fighters in slow motions, and there are also dueling shots of their wives throughout the fight. In the final round, both Mickey and Tony want to stop the fight for Rocky and Apollo, but they refuse, as they prefer to trade punches in the final round, and of course, both of them fall. As I've gotten older, Rocky 2 is another favorite of mine in the franchise, as it fleshes out more of both Rocky and Apollo's characters, and interestingly, Stallone wrote the two as two sides of the same coin, adding even more to the themes around the number 2. Who was Apollo Creed based on? As I've said before, the most obvious answer is Muhammad Ali. Like Apollo, Ali was charismatic, quick-witted, intelligent, and often spoke in rhymes to predict which round he would knock out his opponents in. It's no secret that Ali is considered the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time, and rightfully so, given his speed, power, and technique. Ali would fight from the outside and relied on his speed for defense, though a notable difference is that Ali preferred to move backward, while Creed would duck, bob, and weave in a classic style. Because of the way both fighters kept their hands, they were also susceptible to taking damage. Another possible influence would be Sugar Ray Leonard in terms of public image, and even Joe Louis. It should be noted that, like Leonard, Apollo had the famous bolo punch that he used in Rocky 2. Leonard was also known for his combinations and flurries. As I stated in my Rocky Balboa video, the first fight between Rocky and Apollo is based on Chuck Wepner versus Muhammad Ali, when Wepner, an unlikely contender, knocked down Ali in the 9th round to the shock of everyone, though Ali would go on to win the fight and retain his title. While we're on the subject, let's talk about Apollo's fighting style. Creed is very fast. He moves effortlessly around the ring and can slip in and out of his opponent's way if need be. He jabs from the outside like Ali, wearing his opponents down over time, but can also throw some big combinations. Though relying on his speed, Apollo is still powerful. Some of his punches are enough to knock down Rocky. Apollo has excellent conditioning. Even when being tested to the 15th round of a fight, he can still stand on his feet and move around the ring if need be. In Rocky 2, because the fight is more personal, Apollo is noticeably more aggressive. He comes right out of the gate and lays into Rocky and uses a lot more trash talking and mind games. His windmill bolo punch is enough to throw Rocky off guard, and as Apollo follows up with punches afterward, he's able to knock down Rocky again, frustrating him. Whether it's due to being more aggressive or the intensive training he had, Apollo also seems faster and stronger in this fight. He's also able to trade punches, possibly out of pure anger with Rocky, which causes him to eventually lose the fight as he was no match for Rocky's power and determination. Although we see him in the ring only to train Rocky into spar, he's still in great shape despite being retired for a few years and can emulate clever style to prepare Rocky for his fight. Apollo is still able to move around the ring in his third fight with Rocky. In Rocky 4, Apollo still moves around the ring a bit, though it seems age has caught up with him as he slips and nearly falls in the ring. He has his famous trash talking still, and likely his power isn't what it used to be back in the 70s. In the director's cut, we see that he fights back more when Ivan gains the upper hand. How exactly did Rocky beat Apollo? The short answer would be time, as Rocky said in Creed, though I think he was being humble and there's a little more to the story. For some reason, although I had watched Rocky 2 when I was a teenager, I somehow remembered the rematch being very evenly matched. However, after rewatching the films now as an adult, it's clear that Apollo dominated most of the match. Even though Rocky had got some shots in and was able to weaken Apollo, Apollo was way too fast for Rocky in some cases and was able to land a lot more punches over time. Rocky's time comment does have some significance though, as it's sometimes implied that Apollo was near the end of his career. After all, he had 46 fights where he was undefeated. The second factor is that Rocky simply wanted it more. He had the eye of the tiger, as Apollo puts it, and outright refused to go down. Rocky's heart and determination, which would also help him when fights against later opponents, were just too great. We can even see Apollo look over at Rocky getting up, and realizing that Rocky was still going to get up after their fight, Apollo seemingly gave up, as he knew there was no stopping Rocky. As I saw someone once put it, Apollo was the best fighter, Rocky only won because he wouldn't give up, and that's exactly what Tony said. The man kept coming after you. What led to Apollo's downfall? Like a lot of older men, my dad included, who retired twice, Apollo was perhaps bored or couldn't stand being retired and thought he still had something left. In the director's cut, Adrian briefly touches on this as she says that Apollo can't stand being forgotten, he needs love. Apollo was being forgotten, and this is what could have led him to having an affair. While perhaps he was patriotic for his country, as seen in the first Rocky, I think Apollo also used the excuse to get back in the spotlight. Apollo also said it best to Rocky. Without a war or a fight, the warrior might as well be dead. If he was no longer up there with contenders, was he just another name in the history book? I would also say that pride was also the cause of his downfall. He was too proud to admit that he was too old. Even though he claimed that he was in great shape, he didn't have the same speed and conditioning that he had a decade earlier. Ivan also had the youth advantage, and of course with his superhuman strength, caused by steroids, Apollo just wasn't prepared to take that type of punishment. It could be interpreted that realizing this, he didn't want to stop the fight and live the rest of his life dealing with his injuries. He wanted to go out as a warrior. This would make sense, as Duke acknowledges this in the funeral scene of the director's cut, as he lived and died by the warrior's code. Here are my final thoughts on Apollo Creed. In an era where villains were usually one-dimensional, Apollo was a breath of fresh air as a character. The fact that he was given more detail despite being antagonistic in the second film, and going on to be one of Rocky's close friends in the third film, was nothing short of excellent writing. Honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about his character having an affair resulting in Adonis's birth. Perhaps it was one of the only possibilities they were able to go with to focus on a Creed, but it does leave a stain on Apollo's character. Stallone also mentioned in a making of video of Rocky vs. Drago that instead of killing Apollo, he would have made him severely injured and bound to a wheelchair, changing him to a more subdued, introspective character. Though it also makes you wonder if that happened, would the Creed films have ever existed? Would have there even been a Rocky V or Rocky Balboa? One also can't help but wonder if Apollo would have followed Rocky's advice on fighting his demons, as he did the same when he got older, would he have fought Drago? Nonetheless, while Rocky's one of the pillars of the franchise, Apollo is right up there with both him and Adonis. Rocky may have had heart and determination, but Apollo was the best fighter. And as someone else once said best, Rocky knew how to fight, but Apollo taught him how to box. Let me know what you guys think down below. Is Apollo Creed the greatest of all time? If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it, subscribe, share it with your friends, and comment, as these all help my channel grow. Be sure to check out and subscribe to my gaming channel. I'm trying to get this channel to 1,000 subscribers, and helping this channel also helps me support my main channel. Keep up with me on my socials via Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, stay beautiful, stay awesome, and we'll catch you around next time.